Okay, welcome to this video demo and lesson for CPI 111. In this lesson, we're going to work with the game in Chapter 3 in our course textbook, the Galaxy Mail game. We're not going to build the whole game. Instead, I'm just going to focus on one piece of the game and use that piece of the game to introduce some new functionality from GameMaker that we haven't yet worked with. In particular, we're going to be talking about the use of angles inside GameMaker, and along with angles, we'll be talking about direction, the direction a sprite is facing, and we'll make use of that. We'll also work a bit with the sprite editor, and we'll also work with an event that allows you to swap out one sprite for another sprite. So let's get in and do that now. Before we jump into working with the game itself, I want to just briefly mention something you'll need to keep in mind as you work with angles inside GameMaker. They're done in a kind of an odd way. Normally you would think if you're dealing with angles, it's common for sort of the north pointing position to be 0, and then in a clockwise manner to work around up to 360 degrees. But GameMaker, for whatever reason, doesn't do it that way. Instead, in GameMaker, 0 degrees is pointing to the right, 90 degrees is straight up, 180 to the left, and 270 down. You'll need to know this as you work on more and more complex games. For example, when you do a platformer game, which we'll work on later in the semester, you'll be dealing with gravity, and you'll need to set the direction of gravity, which is usually going to be 270 because it's pointing down, but occasionally, of course, if you're jumping, you may have gravity in a sense going up, or if you're in space, something like that. In our piece of a game that we'll be working with today, we'll also be dealing with angles. In this case, it will be the angles of the direction of our spaceship, the ship that's going to be flying around in the piece of the game that we're going to make. And it's important to have these numbers in mind as you are changing the direction of the ship on the screen, because direction is going to make use of these angle numbers. Alright. Also, as I mentioned, we're going to work with the sprite editor in GameMaker, so I'll just briefly mention that it's not a real powerful sprite editing tool, but it is useful to make some basic modifications to existing sprites that you bring into the program. You can crop and resize, for example, your sprites. You can also make color changes to the sprites, and you can stitch together multiple sprites into a single sprite. And you can do a few other things. For example, you can take a single image sprite and then create a rotation animation from that sprite, which can be very useful. And in fact, that's something we're going to do in today's demo. So let's get into it. I'm using on my computer here a very similar version to the first game file for Chapter 3 that's on the CD-ROM that comes with the book. I'm going to place a copy of the version of the game that I'm starting with here up on the course Blackboard site. It's very slightly different than the one that's on the CD-ROM, and I encourage you to use the one that I'll put up on the Blackboard site. Download it to your own computer and extract it and use it as you follow along with this demo. As we start off, let's take a look and see what the game looks like at this point. So right now, there's not a whole lot going on. We've got a single room with a background image, and then we've got some objects that are we've placed out on the screen, and they're set up to move in a random direction and at a specific speed. When the game starts, we've got moon objects, and then we've got these sort of asteroid objects flying around. In the piece of the game that we're going to make just today, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new moon object that's going to look just like all these other ones, but it's going to be a special version of that moon objects that we see flying around. And we're going to create a spaceship object, in fact a couple of spaceship objects that are two variations of one spaceship, one that is a landed version of a spaceship and one that flies around. So let's go ahead and get working on that now. Alright, what we're going to start off with is we're going to open up our objects here. And we only have a couple right now. We've got the moon and the asteroid. I mentioned that we're going to make a couple of moon objects, so we're going to make one new one, and it's going to be just another version of the existing one. So a handy way to create that new object is to right-click on the existing moon object and choose Duplicate. Then let's call this new version of the moon Object Special Moon. The name of this is going to be very important. You're welcome to name it whatever you want to, but we're going to need to refer to this object's name in an action that we're going to use in the game. So whatever you name the game, you'll need to remember and keep track of that name so that you can make use of it later on. So I've named the object, and I'm going to set the depth of my special moon object to -5. Now the other moon object that we already have in the game is set to 0, I think. And so by setting the depth to -5, the lower the number is, the smaller the number is, the closer to the sort of front of your screen it will be. So the smaller the number is, smaller number objects will appear in front of objects with bigger numbers. So by placing our special moon object at a depth of -5, it will be in front of the regular moon objects, which have a depth that's a bigger number. Now we're going to add another event. We're going to use our special moon as an object for playing sound, and we've done this before. So I'll just do add an event, and I'm going to choose Other, and I'm going to choose Game Start. So the special moon is going to be on screen when the game starts anyway, so we can attach a Game Start event to it. And what I want that Game Start event to do is to play the sound background. This is the sound for the game. It's in that folder, and in fact, it's already been brought into the file, so you'll find it in the drop-down list. Set the loop to true. Before I close this out, I'll briefly demonstrate what the other events are. We have a create event, and what it does is it sets the direction to a random direction out of 360. Here's that angles we were just talking about. So there are 360 degrees in a full circle. So the direction, which is going to be a number between 0 and 359, I guess, will be set to one direction at random at a speed of 4. We have another event, which is an outside room event, and then the action is to wrap both directions. So we're making a kind of an asteroids game, and the idea will be that if a moon moves off the left, right, top, or bottom of the screen, it will reappear in the room again from the other side of the room. Now let's create our rocket objects. We're going to have two objects for the rocket, one that is a landed version of the rocket and one that is a flying version of the rocket. And before we create the first one, we're going to create the landed version of the rocket first. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show you a bit about how you can create a rotation animation. So if I look under my sprites, I have a sprite called Sprite Landed Right. I'm going to open that up. And you'll see, if you look at the properties for this sprite, you'll see that there's only one sub-image. There's only one image, which is just this image of a rocket facing right. I can choose to edit that sprite, and if I do so, that will open up the sprite editor. We're not going to go through many of the functions in here, but you can see you can change the direction, you can scale it, rotate it, and so on. You can do some color changes to it, and you can animate it. And we're going to go ahead and make an animation of this. We're going to choose a rotation sequence, and we're going to make it be counterclockwise, which makes sense if you think about the direction our single image is facing. It's facing to the right, which means its current direction is 0. And what we want to do in our game is we want to have the ability for our rocket to be facing any direction. And so an easy way to do that is to create a series of sub-images via a rotation animation that goes all the way around counterclockwise. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to choose 72 frames to our animation, and I'm going to have it go all the way around in a circle. When I do that, you'll see very quickly GameMaker creates all of these sub-images, and then it automatically plays this animation with 72 frames of our landed ship circling around. Now that I've done that, I'm going to rename my sprite. I'll just call it Sprite Landed, since it includes the full rotation, and we can carry on from there. So let's go ahead and create the object for that landed version of the ship. So, as usual, we'll create a new object. I'm going to call it object underscore landed, and I'll choose the sprite landed sprite. And very important now, a minute ago we set up our special moon to be at a depth of -5 so that it would appear in front of the regular moon, and it would also appear in front of our asteroids. We want now in the game to have our spaceship appear to be landed on the special moon, so it will need to be in front of the special moon. Therefore, for our depth, we need to place it at an even smaller number depth than we did the special moon. You can choose whatever you like, but going by what we've got in the book, I'm going to set the depth to -10. I'm going to create an event, and this is going to be a step and end step event. Slightly different than what we've done in the past. In the past, we've used just the step event, and I mentioned that there's a difference between the different kind of step events in terms of the order of operations for how things occur inside GameMaker. End step allows actions that are performed in the game. They'll be performed immediately before instances of an object are drawn in whatever their new position is going to be on the screen. So by using an end step event with our spaceship, we can find out where the special moon object is going to be and then place our rocket in the same location just before the two of those objects are drawn onto the screen. It's a little complicated to describe, but it basically means that it will allow them to show up correctly on the screen so that the special moon and the spaceship will appear to be in the same location on the screen. So my event is an end step event, and then the action that I want to go with that event is a jump to position. It's on the Move tab and the very first icon. Now, I mentioned that you'll need to carefully track the name of that special moon object because you're going to need to refer to it, and here's where that's going to happen. We need our ship to jump to the special moon, so we need to know the X and Y coordinates of the special moon. There's an easy way to make that happen. We can simply refer to that name of the special moon and then say we want to have the X position of the special moon object. We can do the exact same thing for the Y position, object underscore special moon dot Y. Alright, before we go on, let me show you what this looks like. So I'm come out to my room here, and I'm going to place an instance of my ship out here, so I'll put it off over on the left, and I'm going to place an instance of my special moon over on the right. Now, if everything's working the way it should, as soon as we start the game, you won't actually see this sitting here, and you won't see this sitting here. Instead, you'll see them moving around on the screen, and this spaceship will appear to be sitting on top of our special moon. Alright, so here we have it, and you can see there's our special moon floating around, and there's our spaceship on it moving with it and rotating around. So you'll notice, obviously, that as you're looking at that, the landed spaceship is continuously spinning around without any user input. Well, that's because we just added that rotation animation to the sprite, and by default, GameMaker is automatically going to play that sprite. So we need to stop that, obviously. That's not something we want to have happen. So we're going to make a small change. Let's go back to our landed ship. And what we're going to do is we're going to include a change sprite action inside our step event. So I'm going to click on the main 1 tab, and here's the sprite section. Click on that, and this is the change sprite action. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it so, a couple things we want to have happen. One is that we don't want our landed ship to be rotating around in a circle as it moves across the screen with the special moon. And we also want to show our spaceship facing the correct direction. In just a minute, we're going to make it so that the player can rotate that landed ship around in a circle either direction as it sits on the special moon. And so we're going to set up GameMaker so that it will display the correct sub-image from that rotating image depending on the direction that it's supposed to be facing. So let's do that now. I'm going to select in this change sprite action just the same sprite we're already using, the landed sprite. Now we're going to make use of the direction variable to find out which direction our object should be facing in degrees from 0 up to 360. And then in order to find out which sub-image from our sprite we should show, remember we've got 72 sub-images, I'm going to take that direction and divide it by 5, and that will pull out the right sub-image. Finally, we're going to set the speed to 0. This speed refers to the speed at which the animation that we've got built into that sprite should play. So if we set it to 0, the animation won't play at all. It will simply display whichever sub-image we give it. Now let's set things up so that the player can go ahead and rotate that landed ship around in a circle. I'm going to add a keyboard left event, and then I'm going to include a free move action, and I'm again going to make use of direction. This time in a slightly different way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to collect information about what the current direction is in degrees, and then I'm going to add 10 to it. And if you remember our discussion at the beginning of this lesson, GameMaker starts with 0 degrees facing to the right and then goes up and rotates counterclockwise around till it reaches 360. So if I'm taking the current direction in degrees and adding 10, that has the effect of rotating our object, appearing to rotate the object to the left by 10 degrees. Here we also have a speed variable, but this speed variable is a little different than the one we used a minute ago. Here we're going to leave the speed at 0 because we want our player to be able to rotate that landed ship on the moon, but we don't actually want the landed ship to move forward. If we were to change the speed to something like 1, 2, or 3, that would add a forward movement to it as well as being able to rotate it. So by leaving it at 0, it'll stay in place, but we'll be able to rotate. Now we're going to add the same event so that the player can rotate their ship to the right. This time we're going to take the current direction and subtract 10, which means we'll be able to move to the right because we're decreasing the angle that the ship is facing. Alright, we should be set up now for our landed object. Let's continue on. Now let's create our second version of our spaceship. This will be the flying version of the spaceship. So come up to your object creation. We'll call this one object underscore flying and choose our flying sprite. The flying sprite that you have in the version of the game file that's on the Blackboard site has already been set up with a rotation animation that is identical to the landed version of the spaceship, so you don't have to do anything with it. Let's set our depth of our flying ship to -10 so that it too will appear in front of the moons. Let's add an other event, an outside room event, and we're going to choose the wrap screen action and select for our directions in both directions so that when the flying spaceship goes off left, right, top, or bottom, it will then reappear at the opposite end of the room. Next, we're going to add a step, end step event, and this is going to work exactly the same way it did with our landed spaceship. We're going to change the instance of our sprite. Again, we'll select just the same sprite, the flying sprite. Oops, I did change instance. I mean to change sprite. Change sprite event. And again, we'll choose the exact same sprite, the flying sprite. And again, we'll pull in the direction, so we'll get the degrees that the ship is pointing, or should be pointing, and then we'll pull out the correct sub-image from our flying sprite, and we'll set the speed to 0. So just like we did with the landed ship, we need to make sure that when our flying ship gets drawn on the screen in its new location, it's pointing the correct direction. And to do that, we've got to pull out the correct sub-image from our animated sprite. And to do that, we need to find out what direction it's supposed to be facing when it's next drawn on the screen. Now let's add our keyboard events. We'll add a left keyboard event like we did before with the landed one, and just like we did before, we'll do a move free action. This time though, we're not going to give the player much control over turning left or right. So again, we'll pull in the current direction that the object is facing, and again, now though, we're going to say instead of letting them rotate 10 degrees each time they press that left keyboard, we're only going to let them very slowly rotate their ship around. So only 2 degrees per step as they press this. And unlike what we did with the landed ship, we want the player to be able to move in a forward direction as they're moving along. So we're going to set their speed to 6. And we'll add a right keyboard event. This time doing a direction -2, so that they'll very slowly rotate to the right. And again, we'll set the speed to 6. Okay. Well, we're very nearly finished with creating our small piece of the game in Chapter 2 as a way of focusing on direction and angles, but there are a couple more things we need to do. Staying on our flying ship object, I'm going to add a collision event, and it's going to be a collision with an asteroid. And we're going to set it up so that if the flying ship collides with an asteroid, then we're going to we'll show the high score table, and we will restart the game. And we're going to add another collision event. This time it's going to be a collision event with the moon, not the special moon, but the regular moon. And what we want to have happen is if the flying ship collides with the regular moon, we're going to change the instance and we're going to change it to from the object landed. So instead of having the flying version of the ship, it will switch into the landed version of the ship, and we'll leave everything else the way it is. And while we're still on the same collision, we're going to add another change instance action. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to change into the special moon. But we need to say, we don't want to, it'd be a little confusing if we changed our flying ship into a landed ship and then immediately changed it into the special moon. So we need this time to choose other. So it means that if we collide with the moon, it will change the moon itself into the special moon. That's all we need to do for our flying ship. Now we're going to go back to our landed rocket, and we need a way for this landed rocket to leave the moon and fly around on the screen. So we're going to do that now. This time I'm going to add a key press event and set it to space so that when the player presses the space key, an action will occur. And our action is going to be a free move action. It's going to move off across the screen in whatever direction it's currently sitting on our moon object. And we'll make its speed 6. And because it's now going to be flying, we're going to change the instance from the landed version of the ship to the flying version of the ship. And last but not least, we're going to destroy our special moon. So in order to make this happen, when the player presses the space bar, it's going to start the rocket flying, and we're going to destroy the moon that it's sitting on, basically. So but we have to choose it. So we'll select Object, and then Object, Special Moon. And we're going to save everything, and let's take a look and see what we've got so far. Again, it's not a full game, but it's a piece of the game that covers some of these key functionalities of GameMaker. So here we are, there's our ship. If I push my left key or my right key, the ship will spin around on the moon. If I press the space button, I fly off. I don't have a lot of control, so it's hard to make sure I don't run into things. And if I land on the moon, then it lands itself. And if I get killed, I get the high score table, and then the game will restart itself. So for this lesson, that's all you really need to do. There isn't a specific assignment to turn in for this lesson, but I encourage you very strongly to go all the way through Chapter 3 and try to finish building that game for yourself. It's a great way to practice some of the functionalities that you've already learned from previous assignments, and then also to try out some of these new things as well. So get in there and good luck. Have fun.